We warned you about CoPilot on Windows. Remember that new feature that's going to take a screenshot every few seconds and create a massive searchable database of everything you do. Well, just like the good Lord's creation, before the dirt is even settled, it already has ways to destroy it. Let's go ahead and talk about this. Welcome back to Switched to Linux. If you are new around here, we cover topics about switching to Linux, why one might want to, and yes, we do understand that some people have to keep using Windows in some circumstances. We are sensitive to that, but hey, we do try and get rid of all of those excuses that you have that may not actually be valid. So subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. If you like this type of content, leave us a comment or a like down below. And today we are talking once again about Windows CoPilot. Because guess what, guys? It's not secure. It's very fascinating. So let's first bring you up to speed on CoPilot. We covered this in a video, was it last week or the week before? This is the brand new feature inside of the upcoming Windows 24H2. I think it's 24H2. And what it's going to do is take a screenshot every few seconds. Now, first, let's go ahead and address a couple of the questions I've seen in the comments. Some people have asked, is it 3 seconds or 5 seconds? I think the actual answer is 5 seconds. I might have reported 3 on my previous one. I think most people do because the vernacular has been going across the medium every few seconds. And here in America, few is generally a slang for 3. But it could be 3, 4, 5, whatever. It does look like the official documentation suggests that CoPilot would take a screenshot every 5 seconds. So it's either 3 or 5. Let's lean heavily towards 5 seconds. So every 5 seconds, it takes a screenshot. And what we know now after some people looking at development previews is each one of those screenshots is roughly 600 kilobytes of data. And I forget what they mentioned, what screen resolution that is. That'll be in our article today. The second question is, how much disk space does it use? Well, the minimum disk space on a CoPilot Plus PC is 256 gigabytes. If you have that minimum space, you'll have 25 gigabytes set aside reserved for CoPilot. And if you have any disk larger than that, it will be 50 gigabytes set aside for CoPilot. Also, not every Windows 11 computer has this. It has to be a CoPilot Plus PC, which is going to be a Windows 11 PC that has an NPU processor. This is a new type of processor being placed inside of modern computers, which is effectively a neural processing or an AI processor on board, which prevents you from having to send data to the cloud. And that's where Microsoft has come out and said, this is highly secure because everything is done locally on your system. Well, it turns out it's not quite as secure as we thought. So we have a couple of articles here illustrating how it's not as secure as we thought. So let's go ahead and have a look. So the first one here is Windows Recall demands an extraordinary level of trust that Microsoft hasn't earned. We did cover in the weekly news roundup that there has been a push at Microsoft to prioritize security over cramming in new features because they've had a number of high-profile security risks. Not really good when their CEO, not necessarily their CEO, but their E-suite executives have been phished successfully. That we have found information from their internal databases leaked out. We have found misconfigured databases on their servers. And this begs the question for a company that wants to collect anything and everything it can about you. Now, over here, Windows Recall demands the extraordinary level, and this is an op-ed. So this is there's going to be an amount of opinion in here. And in this, they talk a little bit about this, and the system is called Recall. It's going to be specific computers. The first ones are shipping the end of June on the Snapdragon X processor, although Intel and AMD processors are upcoming very soon that have the NPUs. I was just reading about some Intel, or excuse me, some AMD ones yesterday. So this is definitely a thing to consider. So the problem is that it's going to take a screenshot, and it takes no pains to redact sensitive information, usernames, passwords, not safe for work sites, or anything else you're doing, including if you're using a desktop version of Telegram or WhatsApp, which are supposed to be end-to-end encrypted. It could take copies of messages if you are using those applications while this is going on. Additionally, CoPilot is enabled by default. Now, in In this down here, let's see, the CoPilot PCs are required to have a fast neural processing, so the processing can be performed locally. Local snapshots are protected by at-rest Windows disk encryption technologies. So what this means, at-rest disk encryption means that when the computer is turned off, the disk is encrypted. If somebody walks off with your computer, they can't access the information without the passkeys or means to get into the disk. So at rest, it is encrypted. What happens when you're not at rest? Well, it does turn out that some hackers who have, we'll get into this article in more detail later, some hackers have discovered that, yeah, nothing is actually encrypted at all on the disk. Now, the at-rest disk encryption means the whole disk is encrypted. I do that on most of my computers because I'm in a van. If you're new to this channel, this is all recorded from a mobile van. Okay, I'll run this whole channel from a van from various points around the United States. And my computers are all disk encrypted, save for a couple of them that don't have critical stuff on it. So this means if somebody gets in and steals the stuff, then they can't get into the disks without, painstaking difficulties. So the problem is once we have turned the computer on, the disk is decrypted while it's running. The data is not encrypted at that point in time, which means if somebody has malware on the computer, the malware has free access to the data because it is not encrypted there. So explaining this in more detail, on my encrypted drive on Linux, I have a KeyPass database file for using KeyPass.exe, and that database file is further encrypted. So if you are logged into my computer, you still cannot access any of the passwords in there. So if there's malware running on my Endeavor OS system that is encrypted at rest, and I log into that system and the malware says, hey, a KeyPass.exe database file, they can't access anything in there because the file itself is also encrypted. Microsoft has not encrypted any of this information, neither the text searchable database nor the screenshots. None of that data is encrypted on the current implementation of CoPilot, which means any form of malware having access to the computer can gain access to all of the screenshots and the single database that all of this data is recorded into. So what the system does is it takes it and then it runs it through an OCR, and then it looks for keywords and creates a giant database on what's called a SQLite database file. This is a single file that is put on the computer that can be accessed. So if you're doing things with web design, you might use MySQL database, which is going to be a more separate, standalone, massive database used for a lot of different things. Most websites have those. But if it's something like a small server, a small system, you might use a SQLite database, which is a single file on the disk on the computer. That file on Windows is not encrypted, and that contains basically the directory of all of those images. And it does turn out that anybody with an administrative password can see everybody's snapshots, even though their marketing says no user can see any other users. Well, an administrator can see all users' snapshots, which kind of addresses that concern I had about what about work deployed computers to people. Yes, your administrators are actually the admins, so yes, the administrators can see everything that you are doing on that disk, and depending, if they have a way to mirror that disk image, they could grab some of that stuff as well. So yeah, this is not particularly secure. It is not particularly private, and it is starting to roll out more and more and more. And this is why we warned you about it. So let's go ahead, continue on the Ars Technica article. So it fundamentally breaks the promise of security in that it is enabled by default. You can actually see where it is. You can see where the storage system is. You can see the device snapshots. Presumably, you can also delete them. You can disable it over here. The problem is it is turned on by default, and that is an issue, particularly if people don't know it's there. Now, the saving grace right now is only super high-end PCs are going to have these, and they need at least 16 gigs of RAM. They need that higher-end processor, which is a new type of processor, and so it's going to be a much more expensive system. So generally, you're only going to buy one of these if you absolutely need this type of NPU on board. Whether or not you would like your NPU being wasted with this nonsense is yet to be seen. So, test Recall yourself as a developer. You can actually get it running on virtualization. right now since the processors aren't out, but there are ways that you can do it, and you can run it on ARM or you can run it x86 virtualization as well. And you can see here's what they said. Several days of data amounted to a database of 90K, and our screenshots taken on a Recall PC with 2560 by 1440 screen resolution came in at 500 to 600 kilobytes a piece. So that's why, I mean, think about how much data is actually on your computer. If each one of these screenshots is less than a megabyte and the whole SQL database file for several days is only 90K, yeah, they can fit several months. And that's the plan, is to have at least 3 months of data on your computer running with this. So it does work all locally, which is good. But the problem is they say that, you know, it's secure because no other user can access it. Well, except an admin user can access all of it. Okay. Also, they say that it's secure because your disk is encrypted. Well, that's just because they're trying to force everybody on Windows to encrypt their disks, which we've already talked about in a previous video, is a dangerous prospect. Okay. Disk encryption is excellent if you intend to do it, and if you know that you're doing it, and if you have ways to recover your disk from that. Even my NAS, my network attached storage running Open Media Vault, my disk connected to that where all my data is stored is encrypted. And I have 2 ways to get into it. I have a passkey for it, and I have the password. I typically just use the password, but the passkey is if there is some catastrophic failure in the system, I can pair it with that passkey and open up the drive, which is a little bit more complicated, which is why that's not the primary means that I do it. But that is what we're doing. With this, it's like once you get into the computer, you have access to everything. So they say here that this researcher says that Recall has gaps you can drive a plane through that makes it trivially easy to grab and scan through a user's Recall database if you either, 1, have local access to the machine and can log into any account, not just the account of users whose database you're trying to see, and 2, are using the PC infected with some kind of info stealer that can quickly transfer the SQL database to another system. So this database file is so small it can be taken and you don't even know it's taken. And then the hacker could look through the database locally and then just go out and just grab the images that it wants based on what they're there. Oh, he's using WhatsApp or Signal here. Let's go and take the screenshots during this period of time, because then what happens is they can actually see messages that were supposed to be end-to-end encrypted. So Microsoft has created a way to actually decrypt and backdoor seeing information, at least in snapshots, information that people are doing. This is a really dangerous prospect. This is the type of stuff they're forcing on everybody. And of course, the problem we have here is that Microsoft is forcing these types of behaviors on people without recognizing it. Now we get down to this thing called a total recall script. Yes, that is true, but this is where we're going to jump on over here because they cover it explicitly. Over here on Wired. Now, reminder, CoPilot PCs are not yet out. They are not yet released. Yet a hacker has already figured out how trivial it is to create a hacking tool allowing anybody to gain remote access to a computer and have access to all of this data. This is horrible. So, of course, they're calling the tool Total Recall because, of course, would we expect anything else? I'll be back. I'll be back with a 9mm Uzi, and then we move 5 meters spread, no sound for the people. All right, let's go. So 2 weeks ahead of Recall's launch on new CoPilot Plus PCs on June 18th, security researchers have demonstrated how preview versions of the tool store screenshots in an unencrypted database. Researchers say the data could easily be hoovered up by an attacker, and now in a warning about how Recall could be abused by criminal hackers, Alex Hegna, I hope I got that name right, a research strategist and ethical hacker, has released a demo that can automatically extract and display everything Recall records on a laptop. Dubbed Recall after the 1990 science fiction film. I love how it's after the 1990 and not the abominable remake. I've heard it's abominable. Have not watched either yet. I will get to it soon. So the tool can pull all the information Recall saves into its main database on a Windows laptop. The database is unencrypted. It's all plain text. He says Microsoft revealed Recall in mid-May. Security researchers have repeatedly paired it to spyware or stalkerware that can track everything you do. It is a Trojan 2.0 really built in, Hegnaw says, adding that he built Total Recall, which he released on GitHub in order to show that it's possible and encourage Microsoft to make changes before Recall finally launches. So yes, before the dust even settles on this new Trojan 2.0, hackers have already figured out ways to get in and store the data. Total Recall, he says, can automatically work out where the database is on the laptop and make a copy of the file, parsing all the data as it does so. And while Microsoft's PCs are not out yet, it's possible to use Recall by emulating it on a variety of devices, and it does everything automatically. Now, remember that they are assuming that your computer is going to be secure without this, because when this new rollout happens, the H24H2, when this rolls out, everybody who buys a new computer or reinstalls Windows under that system will automatically be encrypted. You may or may not know that's encrypted, so you may or may not know how to get into your drive if it is, but they're assuming that that's enough to protect CoPilot, but it's not. If they really want to protect it, they need to encrypt it on the device as well. You need to have some form of decryption key to access any of the data if you want to go back and use it. The problem is they don't want to do that. They just want to create a massive backdoor because that's what Microsoft is all about. They're encrypting your drive from yourself and storing the passkeys on their servers so they can give it over to whatever person comes and knocks on the door asking for access to your device. That's the plan. That's the end game. So this hacker says that an attacker could gain a huge amount of information about their target, including insights to their emails, personal conversations, and any sensitive information captured by Recall, because it doesn't take any efforts to hide any form of data. So that is really what we are seeing in the articles. CoPilot is not as secure as they're saying it is. It has some fundamental flaws. And this is the type of stuff Microsoft is pushing. Even if you do not have this computer capable of running this, this is the type of stuff that they're trying to force on people, because remember, you buy this CoPilot Plus PC, it is enabled by default. This means if they get the cost down and get computers to the masses, this type of stuff is going to be enabled by default. And do you really have some pithy need to go back and say, what exactly was I doing 3 months ago? Oh, I need to find that email I found. I'm not sure if you guys know this. If you're looking for the email, searching an AI database on your computer is not nearly as effective as pulling up your email client, going to the sent folder, and searching for something. Do we need an AI processing chip in order to create a database that we can search with common commands, like talking to your computer? Hello, computer. When did I last email Jim? Go to the sent folder on your inbox and type in Jim. You don't need this nonsense. Oh, but what about that cooking recipe? I can't find it. There is a thing on your web browser called a web history. Now, if you're hardened your Firefox, like I teach you to do in my Firefox hardening guides, you may not have that history, but you know, if the recipe is important for you, A, you can probably find it again. I mean, after all, it was a web page you searched for, right? Presumably you can find it again. Or B, proactively print a copy of recipes you might want to hold on to and delete them later if they suck. There's a thought. The point is, we don't need a massive AI database hoisted upon us by which we can search through everything, because it also apparently is very easy for hackers to also search through everything on your system. But this is the type of stuff Microsoft does. They cram and they cram and they cram. They're cramming us ads. We'll get into this video maybe next week, but now they're hoisting upon us again the full screen, difficult to evade, switch to Windows 11 now buttons. We'll talk about that maybe next week. I want a system that doesn't hoist stuff upon me. I want a system that is an operating system that stays out of my way. I don't want it to pop up a random notification to try out OneDrive when I'm in the middle of something and mess up some audio feed with some Windows notification. And yes, I know I can turn all this crap off, but the fundamental question us Linux users ask you Windows users, why the hell should I have to? I should not have to install my system, take one entire day installing updates, and then take one entire day disabling a bunch of nonsense I don't want to do, to have to disable them again next week after the next round of updates have undone a lot of things that I have done. This is why I like Linux. I set my system up, and even if it goes out of date, even if it's like, hey, this thing is crusty old and probably starting to break because fundamental parts of the world are changing, it still lets me use it. I like that. Now, I know enough that I will migrate my operating systems every few years, but I don't want unexpected migrations. I don't want my computer to update itself randomly because it thinks it needs to, because I have probably just turned on my computer because, I don't know, I need to do something, not wait for an hour for it to finish doing something I didn't tell it to do. Unfortunately, some Linux distributions are seeing this new. I'm looking at you, Ubuntu. Literally, the other day I was doing a few days ago, I did a video and I used an Ubuntu screenshot in there. I literally turned on the VM to simply take a screenshot, and things like, don't turn off your PC, we're upgrading. Like, when the hell did you become Windows? So I forced the thing off, returned it on again, and it landed me on the desktop. But yeah, this is why I don't recommend Ubuntu anymore either, because it's going down that path. Distributions that are forcing automatic upgrades, and you start and restart the computer, and it's like, we're installing upgrades. You see, Linux distributions for a long time have been able to install upgrades without doing that. Now, very few distributions are doing that. Okay, to be clear. The problem is Windows forces that on you. With Linux, I have a choice. My operating system doesn't annoy me. It doesn't give me random notifications to try more services that makes them more money. It doesn't bother me with trying to use and cram AI into things to make a bunch of nonsense happen. It's pithy nonsense. I want my computer to be my computer. I want to turn it on and do the work. And guys, if you've not played around with Linux, that is what I encourage you to do. It is not a command line tool. It is not an unstable desktop. You see, I've seen a lot of crazy things in the comments. Yeah, Windows Linux is unstable. It's not. I have had fewer desktop crashes on Linux than I have ever experienced on Windows. They say, one comment said recently, yeah, but there's no features. What features are you talking about? Here on Linux, I can embed online accounts. I can even attach many Linux distributions to a Microsoft account if I want to, and have it control calendars and contacts and file. That's fine, if that's your choice. I choose to do that all through Nextcloud. Some of my computers I have that set up, some of them I don't. But yeah, I can go into my Linux desktop, I can install my Nextcloud credentials, and then any mail client that capable of doing calendars can manage my calendar. Any app capable can manage my calendars. They can manage my emails. They can manage my my files. They can manage my contacts. These are all fundamental principles, which, by the way, most of these features you're talking about, Windows took from Linux. Windows took from, like, Windows just installed like workspaces. Yeah, Linux have been doing that for years. Okay, so test out Linux. Give it a try. Look around at some of the other videos about switching to Linux and just say, hey, can I try these out? Can I test out Linux without harming my current system, just to give it a try? Maybe spin it up. See what I can do on a web browser. See what can I watch some Netflix on there? See the types of things you can do. You will be impressed by what Linux desktop can do for you. If you do not absolutely have to have one particular application, that there is no viable alternative, I get you might need to keep on Windows for some aspects, but consider a switch to Linux to take back control of your computer. Most people who try that out, by the way, they tell you after a period of time, I just found myself in Windows fewer and fewer and fewer times. That is what I encourage you guys to do. With that, thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. Hit that notification button if you are so inclined, and leave us a like and a comment down below. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.